So, hi, John. Thanks for coming here. How are you?
I'm great, thanks, and thanks for inviting me along. It's great to meet you, everybody.
All right. Let
Nice
me
to meet
introduce
you.
my colleagues, Christian and Katja, and let's begin. So, you have been in a Clojure world for a while, but before that, you worked with various consultancies, various companies in the UK and abroad, mainly in Java. Can you tell us how you transitioned from Java to Clojure and why?
Sure. Yeah, it was. I was in Java for quite a long time, maybe like it felt like a couple of decades almost. And yeah, one day I was kind of doing the same kind of things, and I was looking for something to do differently. And some of the challenges didn't really fit into kind of the OO approach that we've been using with Java. I still really appreciate the language, but I kind of fell into Clojure by accident. I kind of seen the talk by Rich Hickey, but I didn't quite get it at that time. It kind of, I think it planted a bit of a seed in my brain.
Mhm.
But it was very different. It was very alien. And I kind of thought back to university, and we'd done some Haskell in there, so I was quite interested in the functional programming side of things and wanted to learn that. And at the time, like around 2000, at the end of like the 2000s, Scala was becoming quite popular, and I had friends doing organizing the Scala use group. So I got involved with that, but I wanted to do a practical event where I could really kind of get a flavor of the language. So I started this Scala Clojure Dojo event. But I'd never run one, so I actually started going to the London Clojurians dojo event to see how it's run. And then after several months, I kind of realized that actually, yeah, Scala is interesting, but it's too complex for me. I want something that like appeals to kind of the simple side of things. And I kind of woke up one day and I kind of felt that I got Clojure and in a way got Clojure on Java. And finally found this language that not only the language, but the community cared about simplicity as well. And I could easily express simplicity in that language as well.
Yeah.
I mean, it did take quite a while to get my first commercial learn, but learning through the community was like really rewarding. And I even started an event called Hack the Tower, thanks to the company I was working for, like Salesforce, Heroku. And I did invite people from the Java and Scala and Clojure communities along, and we could collaborate on projects. And from then I started working on, I started giving a Clojure workshop because I kind of discovered that trying to lead other people into Clojure was like a really great way for me to get my own Clojure experience built up as well. And then eventually got a role in commercial roles with Clojure, and I haven't really looked back since.
Yeah. Actually, I think, I had similar experience with Scala. It seems to me it wanted to be a better Java and at the same time Haskell on JVM, which split the community into two communities at once. And actually, 10 years ago, I lived in Barcelona. I started Clojure meetup group there with a huge help of Scala meetup group. And I was speaking with the developers back then, and they told me, okay, when you are being hired for a Scala team, you need to ask first, are you the Scala OOP team or are you Scala Haskell on JVM team? Because the communities were very different, where some were using applicative functors everywhere, while others did not want to use them at all. Yeah, it's a good thing that Clojure does not try to be two things at the same time, isn't it?
Yeah, because there's lots of things like case classes and other things as well. And with Clojure, you do def and you got the REPL, and that's about it really. So it's a world apart really.
Yes, absolutely. And by the way, if you came back to Java, would you take some habits from Clojure or back to Java?
Yes, I mean, I would miss using the REPL if I was doing Java, but yeah, I would try and keep this idea of simplicity and trying to kind of just not try and model the world in OO, but like say, well, what do we actually need to do? Can we have a more data-centric approach to the things I'm building in Java? I think the language does have some newer things in that allow you to do that in Java, but yeah, it's still, you're kind of shoehorning some of those things that are very easy to do in Clojure into Java, but I definitely want to kind of bring them back.
Yeah. I think using more data transfer objects and stateless objects. So you would have a data model, and you would have basically objects as a namespaces for functions, more or less.
Yeah.
Actually, I saw such an approach with people who learned functional programming, and then they were forced to use object-oriented languages. That they use this, which some people might call it's anti-pattern. They call it anemic model. But yes, absolutely. All right.
Yeah, I think I'd try and use final a lot more in Java if I had to do that as well.
Yeah, it's a good thing. Are you active Clojure developer now, or are you a manager in your day-to-day?
Yeah, so I mean, I was always being quite active in the community, and yeah, I mentioned I got a job in around 2017 with Citigroup, and so from then up till just very recently, I've been working commercially as a Clojure engineer. And so, yeah, obviously Citi is a very large financial institute that I work for, but then since then it's been lots of startups I've been working for as well. And I've been quite lucky that all those startups were Clojure centric as well. So I was working in Clojure teams, doing Clojure work, and it's been quite varied as well. Anything from like data science to kind of like usually systems that are processing large amounts of data, so a lot of financial systems as well. But now I got quite ill over COVID, so I've kind of taken more of a like engineering manager role, which allows me to kind of share my knowledge, but take some of the kind of like development pressure off me. But I still write a lot of code for the community projects I do, especially practically. And this allows me to work at my own pace, my own kind of coding standards, and without the kind of big, kind of insane pressure of deadlines. And I don't have to wake up at 3 o'clock in the morning to support my code as well. So
that's great. When you are working with other developers, how would you manage teams where you have, for example, let's have 3 teams. One team is senior only. The other one mixes more senior and junior developers, and a team that's more leaning junior developers. How would you approach those 3 teams?
Yeah, so obviously you've got to look at each team and what their kind of strengths are and what their experiences are, because you want to be able to give them work that they can do, but you also want to be able to stretch them a little bit as well. So I would certainly kind of organize the work that was most appropriate for them for each of those teams and what they could do, but give them plenty of opportunity to be challenged and to learn as well, but not to be drowning in kind of things that they really don't understand, but also get the teams to work collaboratively as well. So get people from who've got more expertise to kind of help the other teams out, and as a more of a guide rather than kind of doing the work, but like guiding them and reviewing them as well, and getting them to kind of review each other's pull requests as well is a simple mechanism to do that. So it's and obviously trying to give them opportunities to learn. So actually not just having like 100% delivery, but giving them scope to actually grow and learn into the job as well. So they become more experts both in the language and the business domain.
Would you use pair programming, mob programming, things like that?
Yeah, if my engineers are not comfortable doing at least pairing at least some of the time, then that's a red flag for me. I want to kind of try and find what the cause of that is, because people do really enjoy pair programming once you take out like any of the pain points that they have. And sometimes it's just confidence, sometimes there's tooling, sometimes there's just other things that are happening, like the pressure of kind of business. They don't feel they have the time to pair program. So making sure that those are solved, and then just giving people the chance to get used to programming, and then we can do pairing, and then it's very easy to get together as a team to do things as well. And where I currently am, we do a lot of stuff as a team. And and a lot of pairing goes on there as well. So that's really great to see.
My experience is it's the fastest way how to make somebody senior developer. It's the fastest way how to onboard new person to the team and to the code base, but it's extremely intensive. I can't imagine pairing more than 4 or 5 hours per day. Maybe even 5 hours is too much.
Yeah,
So
some people are very happy to be on a call all day, even like if you're not directly talking to each other. And other people want to, you can feel that they want to kind of get off and have some spare time, some time alone to think about things as well. And everybody's different, so you have to accommodate everybody. But yeah, encourage people, make it a safe space for people to kind of get involved in, and make it a rewarding experience as well, because then they'll want to kind of keep on doing more of it.
yes, yes, people don't have to be afraid to come up with bad solutions because others will tell them what's a good solution. And instead of waiting for a code review for a whole day or 2 days, you get instant feedback. You instantly get better. So actually, in 2 weeks, you might make as much progress than others would do in 2 months. So it is a really fast way how to accelerate progress when new people are onboarded or when you want to teach the best practices. So I see that you are still very much involved in software development, and I saw you are using SpaceMax. How you got to SpaceMax and what's attractive for you?
So I started with SpaceMax quite a while ago, actually, and I did a lot. Really liked the setup of it. I mean, initially I tried to use. I had like a very basic setup with Emacs, because like around about 2010 when I was learning Clojure, then the only real tool that supported the Clojure language really well was Emacs, and then Cider came out as well. And I had a very basic, minimal kind of configuration that I just made myself. But everybody kept talking about all these other features that Emacs had, and I didn't even know they existed. But then I got SpaceMax, and like instantly I've got a huge amount of like choices of things I can use at my fingertips, and it's all nicely structured. So the interface is a really nice mnemonic menu, so you can find things. Things are very discoverable, very consistent across different languages as well. So coming from Java to Clojure, then yeah, you could see that you could do the same thing with the same keyboards for different languages. That was really, really nice. And it was just a very supportive community as well.
Yeah.
So I ended up writing a book for everything I learned, again, because I found that really useful way for me to obtain and retain the information I was learning. Because yeah, there is a huge amount of things you can do in SpaceMax, but you don't have to do everything. So
Yeah. This discoverability is, I guess, the best feature because Emacs is so powerful editor, but people often end up learning just 5% of its capabilities. Yeah. And here, when you press space and you immediately see, okay, buffers, B, and what can I do with buffers? So it's an easy and fast way how to learn what Emacs provides for you. Actually,
yeah, I was doing so much more with Emacs once I started using SpaceMax. I thought, oh, you can do this. Oh, this is really easy. And narrowing, I'd never heard of narrowing before. And then, yeah, all these things that people like kind of intrinsically know after using Emacs for like 10 years. I just wasn't aware, and it was a really fast way to get up to speed.
Yeah. Actually, I don't know if you know about one of our products, Frankie. It's recruitment management software, and it's inspired by SpaceMax.
Nice.
So when you want to create new candidate, you press space C, like candidate A, to add, and it opens the form where you can add a new candidate. And over time, we want to cover all functionalities with SpaceMax like shortcuts. We have maybe 30 shortcuts already in this model. We even show the tooltip on the bottom of the screen. So yeah, SpaceMax is really inspiring, and I think it's a good pattern. All right, let's get back to Clojure. So, what do you think is the best on Clojure?
So I do like the simplicity of it, and I've mentioned this before, but for me, it's by far the thing that sticks out the most. Is like, this is the way I think about everything I do now. Is like, well, how can we make something simpler? And it's an incredibly powerful kind of tool. And but the language of Clojure itself is simple, because I'm of a certain age where there's only so much I want to learn. I like to do as well as learning, and I don't want to have like a continually kind of learning stuff just to be able to do something simple.
Yeah.
So I appreciate the simplicity of the language syntax itself, but also the design approach that people take in the community, and the design approach you can take because the language enables that for you as well. So other languages I've kind of tried to model, and people to still do, model this complexity of the entire world, which again leads to very complex systems, which are really hard to maintain. Whereas if you have a simple pieces of code, you can assemble them together and make this complex system, but each individual piece is really simple to maintain and extend and understand, and even be very deterministic about what it does. You give it the same piece of information, you get the same result out. It's so much more expected, so you can easily work with the system and have more confidence in that as well. But I also like the data-centric design around Clojure as well, which I think something evolved during the life of the Clojure. So people using Clojure early on weren't so kind of data-centric, but now everybody is very kind of data-centric. It's all about like, but it also again makes it really simple, because if your way to model the world is a hash map, like a key value pair store, I mean, that's so easy and but yet so powerful to kind of work with, and it kind of helps break down this complexity that we have to deal with every day. And when that data structure is immutable, I mean, that makes it even simpler to reason about as well. And obviously I couldn't live without the REPL either. So it's truly unique experience as well, that I've never really had with other languages, and I would be so lost without it. Just to be able to discover and deconstruct code as well, and explore new ideas.
I come from TDD background, and multiple times what happened to me with REPL-oriented programming, that I still wanted to write the test first, but I wanted to explore how the solution might look like. And then I unexpectedly implemented the whole functionality because it was so productive in REPL. And then I ended up with the code without test, and I broke my TDD loop because REPL-oriented programming is insanely productive, especially when you don't know exactly how the code should look like. So you're not writing it down, but you need to experiment a little bit. Yes.
Yeah, so yeah, for me the REPL is about kind of coming up with kind of like the design options, and then deciding on one and putting it into a test, and then like, well, okay, how do we actually satisfy that test? And you can go back to the REPL and think of different ways to satisfy that test as well. Now that feeds into like a function that you've designed as well. So it really kind of drives that rapid kind of learning process, and helps you make a decision based on experience really quickly.
Yes. And when you were speaking about data-centric or data-oriented programming, another advantage is, since we have just 4 basic collections or data structures, instead of implementing a couple of functionalities over and over, you implement higher-order functions or functions that expect a map or a vector, and it will work in all programs you will ever implement in the future, because it's not hidden in your object. It's there is a function that knows how to work with hash maps in a vector, and it will forever be able to work with hash maps in a vector.
Exactly, yeah. It's just simple. Yeah.
Yes. What type of people Clojure attracts?
I think this has been really interesting. I was kind of lucky to be involved in Clojure fairly early on, not from like 2007, but like around 2010. And around that time, there was, it was predominantly people coming from Java engineers, and usually the more experienced ones as well, who kind of saw the advantage of Clojure quite easily. They didn't have to be convinced around it as well. And yeah, it was great to kind of have that kind of experienced engineers kind of shaping how people were using the language as well. It was really great. And I think maybe a few years later, maybe like 3 or 4 years later, then Clojure scripts started kicking off, and I think that added a very different dimension of people getting involved in the wider Clojure community as well, and also allowed a lot of people who are doing back-end engineering and didn't want to touch the front end to actually start doing front-end development. Things like Figwheel and reagents and Reframe kind of really helped drive Clojure script and allow people to do more front end than they would normally do anyway. And I think there's just more general diversity in the programming language now. I mean, it's a general purpose programming language. And I've met many people over the last like 5-10 years who are starting to do Clojure as their very first programming language commercially. And so that's really great. I mean, we've locally in the London Clojure areas, we've run something called the Clojure Bridge London event, which is specifically targeting underrepresented groups to help them get into coding. And so like half the people who come along have never coded before, and they're trying out Clojure and they're being successful at the language. And some people are just kind of learning their first language and then looking at Clojure as a nice way to balance and see other ideas about how they can, what they can apply to the languages that they're going to be using commercially as well. But some people, yeah, straight into Clojure and Clojure jobs as well.
It's still kind of rare. I met only 2 people who started with Clojure as their first programming language and the only language they ever used professionally. But yes, about 12 years ago or 13 years ago, when I started with Clojure, it was mainly Java developers who just wanted less noisy language. And the second big group were actually Ruby developers. Back then, 13 years ago, Rails was a big thing. And these people, they wanted beautiful language. And Clojure, just like Ruby, is a beautiful language. A little bit different, but it's also a beautiful language. So for Ruby developers, it was aesthetics, but they didn't want to do any more monkey patching, or you change something in your model and it breaks your view. This was happening in Rails because all of those dependencies were hidden. And Clojure being very explicit. I know that the word explicit is reserved for Python, but Clojure is way more explicit than Python will ever be. It makes it much easier to see where the error comes from, and it's much easier to catch it in comparison with Rails. But you're absolutely right that in the past 5 years, it's not just Java developers, Ruby developers, but it's way more people from Python, even Golang.
Yeah, there's a really nice community called Clojure, which are doing a lot of data science with Clojure as well, and either purely in Clojure or using the bridges into Python as well. So it's a really kind of exciting time to kind of like see that develop.
Yes, yes, great. When you would be building a team, let's say a Clojure team, or let's say a team that should be very productive, what are the most important skills and qualities you would be looking for in members in this team?
So I guess for me, it always comes down to learning and communicating, which for me are really kind of like the two sides of the same thing. Without these kind of fundamental skills, or at least the motivation to want to apply them every day, then you tend to just get a collection of individuals who are kind of just, well, I know my bit and I know that bit, and they can't work together. So you have individuals that might be very good, but you don't have a team. You don't have like a team that can kind of build on each other and learn from each other as well. So, and especially where I work at Griffin now, I mean, there's so much to learn. I mean, we've built a bank and we've still got more to build. And so learning is like an essential kind of thing that we do, that we need from our engineers, because there's always new challenges. We don't create the same thing. We don't create CRUD stuff anymore. It's always something new and something exciting, something we've never done before, and usually in ways that haven't been done by other people either. And so learning is always like an important way to learning. Yeah, being able to apply learning and share that learning with other people is kind of just really is an essential kind of foundation for anybody in the team. And I'm quite lucky that my team are really good at that and really good at sharing and communicating that, not just with themselves, but again across the whole company that are working as well.
Actually, yeah, go ahead.
And I think it's like learning, being very modest in what you're learning as well, and who you can learn from as well. So I mean, you can learn from anyone. It's like somebody who's just started, you can learn a lot from those people. Somebody who's been in the company for a long time obviously has a lot of experience, but even people in the business is like, we're always kind of learning about the business, understanding what we can and can't do, what we should and shouldn't do as well. So it's really great.
Yeah. At Griffin, it's actually a good example, as it's in finance, which is very contextual environment. One of the first applications in the world that have ever existed were used in finance departments of companies and banks. So you might need to hire people who, at the same time, become good Clojure developers and learn all of those systems, compliance, regulations, a legacy of really being in finance. Do you think it's easier to know finance, for example, coming from a bank as a Java developer and switch to Clojure, or come as a Clojure developer and learn all the finance stuff?
That's tricky. I almost think, like, by default, I would answer that it's easier to kind of learn Clojure if you already know finance, because finance can be quite complex.
Yeah.
To put it simply, be very complex to understand. There's lots of different rules, and even if you're just within one geographical region, there's so many different kind of things to kind of deal with. But when you kind of want to be more global, then it's even more complex on top of that as well. So certainly we do look for people who have those kind of experiences from other companies, and it's great to kind of get that on board. So and we can probably teach Clojure, or we're more confident about teaching Clojure easier and quicker than potentially teaching somebody something about finance, and it may be something we don't even really know. It might be not one of our strengths, kind of thing, or it might be a new area that we want to move into as well. So that's a real kind of advantage if somebody has that as well. And we do so much already, but there's always so much more to kind of do as well.
Yeah. There is insane amount of business logic, insane amount of screens, most likely plenty of data grids and forms. Very often this business logic is in other companies, is in the database. I don't know if you are using stored procedures or if you keep all the business logic in Clojure. But it might.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's kind of like basically you can think of it as an event stream of all the things that happen, and we put that into. We actually use like Foundation DB just for the sheer kind of transaction processing volumes that we can get from there as well. But yeah, it's not 100 million miles away from like Kafka, but we found this much more of an advantage, and we have like our own kind of event stream management, and then it just feeds into the database as well. So we have a really fast persistence. We have done some things around Datomic as well for like the longer term persistence as well. But yeah, so it's more about kind of like managing all these events, because there's so many different events that are happening, but providing it like a consistent way to do that.
Yeah,
and we've got some really nice technology there.
Yeah, let me touch the topic of building forms and data grids in Clojure. What dev stacks would you recommend to build such a powerful application?
Yeah, so I've always kind of tried to make it as simple as possible on the front end, especially. So I mean, I've done a surprising amount of stuff just with reagents, and even just simple Clojure, reagents, some CSS libraries off the shelf, and then either using Reframe or taking ideas from Reframe and adding them on top of reagent as well. Or even just doing it purely in ClojureScript, and then using a few like common JavaScript libraries to kind of do the things that don't really add any extra value as well, things that are just kind of basics as well. But yeah, it's my advice is for the front end. I think when people start doing it, especially when they come for the back end, they realize just how complex it can be. So trying to make that simple as well is probably the best approach, best advice I kind of give there.
Yeah. What do you think about what about the technologies where the code is rendered on backend, but it still gets some single page app features like in Rails, it's Turbo. In Elixir or Phoenix framework, in Elixir's Livewire, I think. There is Inertia.js and other technologies where it replaces snippets on page, so you can render everything on backend. Do you think this has the potential to grow more?
I think it's still a very like solid and well understood approach, and yeah, it's if you don't have like an incredibly complex UI, which I guess most people don't really need that, then yeah, you can drive everything from the back end and just use Hiccup or Selma to kind of generate
Yes.
the most of the web stuff, and you can include CSS with those as well. And it is, yeah, it's less likely to kind of break. I think one of the challenges with a very large, complex app is that if one thing breaks, it can kind of have unexpected consequences throughout the application as well. So you don't really want like a very basic kind of informational website to break because the login breaks and then everything stops working. That would be, yeah, that's too complex. And there's so many different ways to do the front end now. I mean, you can do the back end stuff, but you could also use HTMX, which is quite interesting as well. There's also other technologies like Svelte that are coming out that's kind of try and simplify the use of Clojure script and more of a focus on like simple HTML and CSS as well. Yeah, so there's just so many different ways to do the front end. It's interesting. So you've got choice, but then you have to figure out which is the most appropriate choice for you.
Yes. Actually, HTMX is really worth mentioning because it's very productive. We actually used it. We built our own documentation for Clojure, flexdoc.flexion.com. And we used HTMX, and we used it in a couple of custom projects, and it was very successful. It's productive, it's easy, and developers like it. At the same time, I think they like it because Clojure developers overall are more often people from backend programming background, and so they know backend development better than front-end development. And if they can do all the logic and as much things on backend, it makes them more productive.
Yeah, and it's kind of interesting to see like full stack things coming out, like electric Clojure as well. That's kind of very interesting. So it'll be interesting to see how that develops and as that matures. Is that nice and easy to use, and which kind of use cases does it really fit into?
Yes. Electric is very interesting. It's really it hides, it completely hides whether the code is running on backend or front end.
Yeah.
Yet it somehow works. We noticed that on your GitHub, it shows that you have daily commits. Can you tell us more what you are working on? Is it for work or is it your project?
Yeah, so I used to do lots of stopping and starting of projects as well, and then it's so easy to kind of like not start again. So I've tried to kind of do something every day. And some of those commits are just journal, but doing a journal as well is very useful for me, keeping my motivation up, keeping people informed on what I'm doing for the Practically website and any changes I'm doing, so they can go look at that. But yeah, also I continually work on the Practically books, but also some of the projects I do. I have a nice project templates thing, which is a great way to kickstart a project. You can just generate a production-ready template for a project, which all runs. You can give it its own namespace, and you can actually run it locally. You run it in Docker. It's got a bunch of the GitHub actions as well, so you've got CI working already. So it's quite out of the box, and then all you need to do is actually just tell it what to do, like add the business logic and so on. And yeah, so that's good fun. It does require a bit of maintenance because there's always new libraries, updated libraries as well. And I manage a repository of aliases for the Clojure CLI tool as well. So you can use all the community tools on top of Clojure very easily, just with one configuration.
By the way, for those who will watch this and who don't know what is practically, would you mind to tell what it is?
Yeah, sure. So I think this kind of came from the Clojure workshops I was running. I was running them once a month for like 5 years, and I was slowly kind of gathering up my experiences and then writing them. And then I thought, well, let's just publish these as a blog. But then that became so big, and it became a book, and then it became several books. So if you go to practical.li, there's 100 hours of videos of me live coding in Clojure. Most of them are around kind of doing things like the 4 Clojure challenges or exorcism. So you can kind of see and I describe my thought processes and how I'm coming up with these particular designs. There's the books. So there's one on Clojure, which is focused around Clojure and Clojure CLI and how to do things with Clojure and with the REPL and so on. And then there's the book on Spacemacs to tell you how to do not just Clojure, but like generally do a whole bunch of other things with Clojure as well. And I've been more recently also been using NeoVim as well, which is really nice if you want a very lightweight, only a very terminal-based approach to doing Clojure development. Then yeah, Clojure and Conjure is a really nice kind of NeoVim tool that's very similar to Cider as well. So it's the same kind of good experience there.
Yeah,
and then there's more of kind of general engineering one as well, which I've been capturing stuff as well. So.
Sorry, I interrupted you. Do you want to finish?
No, that's it.
Okay. I wanted to say that there is also SpaceVim extension. I was using it, and it's very good actually. And when somebody likes Spacemacs but likes Vim as well, it might be interesting, and it's still developed. So I think it's worth shout out.
All right. Yeah, there's quite a few nice little community distributions for NeoVim. I went with Astro NVim, which also has that very similar. It's very inspired by Spacemacs experience as well. And I wrote a little Clojure pack for the community, Astro NVim community. So you can just basically add the pack, or you can use my configuration, and it's just like you're off. You just clone that and install NeoVim, and you've got a really nice kind of like experience there.
All right, great. Now for the last topic, which is completely unrelated to programming, and it's cycling. So you are a avid sportsman who likes cycling for well over a decade, aren't you?
Yeah, I guess I've been cycling since I was a kid, off and on. I think I got a bike when I was about 10 years old. I was born in kind of tiny little villages in the middle of nowhere, in the middle of North Yorkshire. So the only way to get around was the taxi of mum or dad, who were always busy. So once I got a bike, I could go and see friends whenever I wanted to. And I've always liked to cycle. I lived in Amsterdam for a few years, so that's a great place to cycle as well. Yes. But even in London, it's a lot better now as well. I'm a member of the local cycling club, and we went to the Isle of Wight last weekend, and we basically cycled around the Isle of Wight, which it's basically an island just off the coast of Portsmouth, and it's like 60 miles, 110k, and we spent like 5-6 hours cycling around there and had some nice dinner. So had a nice lunch halfway along. Yeah, it's beautiful.
Yeah, you also cycled all across the UK.
Yes,
from Old Roads to Land's End, and you cycle. You did a career break, right, for a year, where you were cycling, and you were a courier for a year, right?
Yes. Yeah, so the Land's End to Johnny Groats is quite a kind of a popular kind of route for cyclists who want a really big challenge. I did that in 9 days, and it was something like, it was over 100 miles a day for 9 days in a row without any breaks. Obviously, you slept at night, but yeah. And then way before then, I think I'd had a career break around, I think it was around 2005-06, and I just wanted to do something different. I had a lot of kind of stress and challenges from being in software development, and it was kind of a funny time with the people weren't hiring so much. So I just decided to take a break and get some perspective on things. And I got a job as basically a courier, a cycle courier, delivering parcels around there as well. And that was much more interesting job than I thought, because basically you have to solve the traveling salesman puzzle constantly. If you want to make any money or not, if you just deliver a couple of parcels a day, you get like a few pounds, and it's not livable on. But yeah, so essentially the controller on the end of the radio kind of tells you which packages to go pick up, but they never tell you when to drop them off. So you have to actually work out, as you're picking these parcels up, you have to kind of work out, well, should I drop something off first, or should I go and pick the next thing up? So you have to continually do the routing around there. And I didn't have a smartphone with Google Maps on to tell me where to go. I had like an A to Z kind of like physical book to look up. And yeah, so, but I soon got used to it, and used to having like 5 or 10 packages in a bag that I carried. And then as I'm going along, I mean, the controllers did they had a sense of where they thought you were going to go, and you kind of had to be in tune with what they were trying to do. But yeah, it was really good fun, and a great kind of experience. But obviously, it's not enough money for a career, but it's a good kind of have a break. And when I came back, I was much more refreshed and more excited and motivated to kind of do software engineering again.
Yes, and so many years of cycling consistently must have had an incredible influence on your physical health. Do you feel that it makes you, let's say, more energetic, more ready for each day?
Yes, it certainly does. So cycling and doing some yoga as well just helps with that kind of energy levels, especially in the morning. Obviously, having something meaningful to do makes a big difference as well. So I enjoy my job, then I'm going to be excited about getting up in the morning. But yeah, like cycling and just going for a walk regularly as well just gives me enough energy to keep going as well. Even after all the COVID stuff, it's been really great to help me kind of recover from that as well. And yeah, I'm feeling much more myself now because I'm out active and doing things as well. And I even got like a new Fitbit thingy. Oh. It's not Fitbit, it's a Garmin smart activity tracker. So I can even kind of measure my my own blood oxygen and everything else like that as well. So it's kind of a nice motivation, and using like apps to kind of track how much exercise you're doing as well. Gives you a little bit extra push to kind of keep on doing it, even when you're a little bit sluggish one day. So.
Yeah. Do you know your VO2 max?
Not yet. It's still calculated. I have to do like a few more days before I get my VO2 max done.
Yeah, because
I've only just got this a couple of days ago. So
yeah, there are some good statistics that show that high VO2 max correlates with a longer, let's say, lifespan, most likely also health span. So I wouldn't be surprised if those hundreds, maybe thousands of hours on a bike could be rewarded by thousands of hours of extra life. So all the time you have spent on a bike haven't been lost in a way, because you will live longer, most likely.
Well, I hope so. I hope that is the case. Yes, I certainly feel healthy. I certainly don't feel quite my age. It did say my Garmin age is actually less than my chronological age, so that's really good. So yes, so it sounds like I'm on the course to live a little bit longer. And I think when I do retire, I'll still be doing like the practically stuff as well. I don't think I'll ever retire from that. But if I retire from commercial work, then it'll just give me more excuse to go cycling again. So.
Yeah, and cycling is something you can do to very high age. My neighbor, she was cycling until her 90s. My father-in-law, actually, he was running marathons and half marathons.
Sorry.
No problem at all. So my father-in-law, he was running a bunch of marathons, half marathons, like 2 half marathons per month, 3-4 marathons per year, and he can't anymore because of his hips. So he picked up cycling, and he can cycle normally, and most likely he will be cycling to his 80s, because it's unless you fall off the bike, it's very safe sport. So yeah. If people should bring one thing from this interview, and if it's not, let's use Clojure, the other one might be try cycling. You will see the world and you will be healthier at the same time, right?
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. I think my favorites on my social medias are like Clojure, cycling, cats. Yeah, it's pretty much my life. And yeah, it's and community as well. Like, I mean, I do a lot of stuff because of the community, and the cycling community. The local cycling club has given me a lot of motivation to get back, because I did have a bit of a break during COVID, and they've really helped me kind of keep motivated and get back into cycling as well. So that's really nice.
Perfect. Perfect. Thank you. Is here anyone who wants to add anything or ask anything? All right. So let me thank you. It was time well spent, really. Thanks a lot, and see you in the future.
Thank you very much, everybody. It's been a pleasure to talk to you. Thanks.